Hello everybody and welcome. Today I'll be bringing to you the video portion of my March video newsletter. The theme that I addressed during the month of March has to do with this thing I call the GBM, our gut-brain-mind connection. It's really a two-way street, and I'll be talking a little bit about what happens in each direction. What I mean by that is there is a tremendous amount of information that's emerging showing that it's really our gut, and specifically the microbiome or the bacterial colonies that live inside the gut, that regulates a whole cascade of health-related difficulties. So what we put into the gut, what we feed that bacteria, is critically important in regulating the rest of our body, including the health of our brain. So that's one direction, from gut and microbiome up to the brain, from brain to mind, and the rest of our physical and mental health. But that street also goes in the other direction. We can use our mind to rewire our brain and to regulate all sorts of digestive difficulties. The most common condition that I see in my office is irritable bowel syndrome, that people of all ages, both genders, although women tend to show it more than men, and they learn to use their mind and their brain to regulate the gut so you get a healthy movement in both directions. Your gut helps to support good mental and emotional health, and you can use your mind to be able to regulate your gut. So I thought I would talk to you about three different points about how this gut-brain-mind connection first developed. It's surprising to think about it, but really our brains developed to support our gut. Long before our brains developed, we all had a means of taking nutrients in from our environment and getting rid of things that we no longer needed. In a sense, the brain developed primarily to help move the gut toward sources of food or to get our bodies away from sources of danger. So perhaps it's not that surprising, since from the very beginning there was this intimate link between our brains and our guts, that today so many people talk about having very strong gut feelings, gut sensations, or a sense, an emotional sense right in their gut. I can tell you that in my office, most of the people that I see who come in with digestive difficulties are not only being helped to re-regulate and rebalance gut functioning, but by listening to their gut sensations, we learn an awful lot about what's going on in their day-to-day lives that may be a tremendous source of distress. So the person with IBS, who may have tremendous anxiety about test performance at school, or conflicts in a marriage, or who may have IBS in part as a legacy of some difficult traumatic experiences in their past. What I see is that gut sense is not only a cue about what we need to do to rebalance the gut itself, but in many ways it's a window into the person's past and a window into what they need to do in their future to be able to help not only their gut feel better, but to help them function better and feel better in the rest of their lives. Well, how do we support that? How do we make that two-way street work to our advantage? It's important to recognize the central importance of the gut and the lining of the gut. That lining, the outside lining of our intestines, is really the front line of defense between what merely passes through us to be excreted from the body and what's able to get from the gut into the body. Unless it passes through that lining, it's literally just passing through. So decisions at a cellular level, at a molecular level, about what passes through or what gets into the body, into the bloodstream, and then distributed through the body is critically important. So supporting healthy microbiome culture and making sure that the lining of our gut remains healthy, and we can do that with certain nutrients, certain foods that we eat, that is really the vanguard, the front line of defense and support of our overall physical and mental health. When we don't take the time to really pay attention to what we can take in and digest so that it is absorbed into the body in a healthy way, the list of inflammatory and other kind of health problems that we open the door to is really quite long. When we open the door through poor digestive and nutritional support habits, here are some of the kind of conditions, most of which are inflammatory, that we open ourselves up to. Asthmatic problems, significant allergies and various food sensitivities. Many people I see have energy problems, chronic fatigue, depression, and significant anxiety patterns. They can be rising from a poorly regulated gut into the rest of the body. Diabetes, sugar craving problems. Certainly obesity is a major inflammatory condition that in part is a sign of what's happening at that lining of the gut and what that injured lining allows into the rest of the body proper. We open ourselves up to all sorts of intestinal disorders like IBS, or in certain cases inflammatory bowel disease like Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis. People have significant joint problems, rheumatic problems. There can be significant problems on the skin itself, which is our outer skin. The gut is our inner skin, and we can have problems at the lining, so to speak, of both of those areas when we don't pay attention to the health of our inner lining, the lining of the gut. Even problems with insomnia or high blood pressure can in some cases be traced back to problems that originate at the level of the lining of the gut and the inflammatory reactions that get activated if we don't take care to pay attention to it. So if inflammation is such a problem, what are some nutritional strategies that we can use to be able to keep that inflammation in check? This is a very complex area. I have some information about that in the blogs that are part of this video newsletter, so I really invite you to check that out. But in brief, what is important to do is to reduce the amount of processed sugar that we eat, the amount of simple carbs that we eat, because those are in and of themselves pro-inflammatory. They support inflammatory problems that spread through the body. It's important instead to get our calories not from sugars, but from more complex foods like lean sources of protein, lots of leafy vegetables, and a certain amount of fruit. And it's also really important that we get good sources of healthy fats. Our brain actually is largely fat, and certain kinds of fats that we eat, the kind of things that you might get by eating nuts and seeds, are really very good in bringing into our body, through the gut and into our body, sources of healthy fat. Again, more on that in some of the links that are in this newsletter. Let me finish up with a little bit about the psychology of the gut-brain-mind connection. When I think about what it is that the gut does, I think that it essentially does 4 different things. And they are the same 4 things that many of the clients that I see in my office struggle with. So there's this parallel between healthy gut functioning and healthy psychological or life functioning. To me, healthy gut functioning comes down to the extent to which we can manage 4 different processes. And interestingly, they're the same 4 processes that at a psychological and personal level we need to practice in our own day-to-day lives. The 4 are what we take in, what we keep out, what we keep in, and what we let go. So when we manage those 4 functions, the function of keeping things inside the lining of the gut so they can be excreted, taking things in through the lining of the gut to nourish the body, learning to let things go, absorbing them from the body into the gut so they can be passed out, and what kind of things we want to keep inside the gut. The microbiome, for example, we don't lose all the bacteria. That's kept in there because it's so critical to our health. Those 4 functions have a parallel in what we do with our day-to-day lives. Many of the people that I see with digestive difficulties struggle with what they're going to take in from their outside world. Many have had experiences where what they take in leads to feelings of betrayal or mistrust or other significant difficulties. Sometimes they have difficulty with boundary setting. They're not sure what to keep in and where to assert themselves and when to be more flexible. So you get this very interesting parallel between those 4 gut processes and how they show up in our psychology. My own view is, in many ways, it's a reflection of how both our brains and our minds and our guts have learned to co-develop. So what affects the mind and brain affects the gut, and what affects the gut ends up affecting people's minds and brains as it shows up in their day-to-day lives. So you might say that gut therapy is ultimately not just about the gut. Gut therapy is about how we live, what we take in, what we keep in that's precious, we don't give it away to anybody else. How do we learn to keep out toxic people and toxic influences in our lives? How do we manage those 4 functions physically, and how do we manage them in our day-to-day lives? And after many years of working in this area, what I can say is, when you do in one area, it shows up in the other. A healthy gut supports a healthy brain and mind, as well as a healthy life, and developing healthy mind and brain and life habits is amazingly powerful in supporting the health of the gut. I hope you check out some of the other resources that are in this month's newsletter. I look forward to talking with you again soon. In the meantime, take care. Thanks for watching.